So I have a psychopathic husband. He thinks that I'm having an affair with the neighbor because I mentioned how good his physique was. He works at the gym. He's a trainer. What did you expect? Well, things just kept escalating because you won't believe what my husband did to the neighbor. I don't know my husband at all. At least not anymore. I don't know who he is, and I'm afraid it will escalate. There's a chance that this could be solved, a good chance in fact, but it's not like the pain's gonna go away. It turns out that the new neighbors moved down the block. It's a cute couple. He's a trainer at a gym, and the wife is a model. We've been talking for a few days and almost always overlapped at the grocery store. They are very nice and have been together for several years. However, my husband Brian's not very excited about the idea. He's never been a jealous or violent person, but since this couple came into our lives, things have changed dramatically. I'll admit that the guy is very good looking and has a body, anyways, and charisma. I mean, he's a gym trainer, and it's normal for him, but the thought is something Brian can't tolerate. Even with our friends, his buddies, everyone's admitted that indeed our neighbor is objectively hot. But he can't process the idea because he thinks I'm being attracted to or seduced by him when it's nothing of the sort. Come on, his wife is just as attractive. I don't go around blaming him all the time for this. Nor do I insinuate that he could have an affair with her at any moment. I just see things as they are. I feel that his self-esteem is very fragile. He's gained a few pounds in the last few years, and it's affected him on emotional levels. However, it's not like he wants to or does much to change this. Because every time he sets out to start a diet or start some exercise program, he ends up at the nearest restaurant, ordering a medium pizza with a 6-pack of beers. This is how anyone can get depressed. I mean, I try to touch on all these points very superficially since, as I said, he gets a little annoyed when somebody points out the obvious, and if so, of course, he will live with suffering all his life. What's more, I've even offered to accompany him in his exercises, so that I could also activate myself with it. It's time to stop seeing models on social networks with a face of tragedy and say that I can also be one of them. Yeah, but he's weird and prefers to do everything according to him, at his own pace. It's weird because usually you look for others to accompany you in your routines and make the practice more dynamic. But he didn't used to be like this, I swear. Well, it turns out that we've had some down times lately with our job, and there's the fitness issue. It's not indicative for him to start acting that way, and if he keeps this up, at any moment things might turn a little dark. I've sinned to myself in the past by tolerating negative behavior from other boyfriends, but it's precisely because of the security that Brian gave me that I decide to give him a chance. An opportunity that later ended in marriage. That he now goes on about, the sort of thing is not only strange to me, but it's very offensive, since he knows very well that I could never cheat on him. Or well, maybe he doesn't, because if he trusted me, he would not be with those attitudes. This has caused me to decrease my interaction with the neighbors, and I even changed my shopping hours to night. One of the worst times to shop because of the danger in the area. The last time he saw me with a neighbor's wife, he asked me if I did not mind to stop talking to her. Well, I asked him what he meant by this, and he just replied, nothing. Implying something else. I mean, it seriously made me mad when he takes that stance, and I wanted to vent to you guys because if I don't, I think I'm going to go crazy. Anyways, that's it for now in my life. I was going to mention the new bread-making classes I'm taking, but this topic just won the race. But before the onslaught of complainings and lecturing begins, no, I won't be with a person who mistreats me psychologically, because that life is no longer for me. I believe in the power of dialogue, and it's a matter of sitting down and talking seriously about it. If not, it'll be a matter of taking it to couples therapy because I don't plan to continue like this. My friends have been thrilled with Brian, but my family loves him, and going through all of this overwhelms me. I even dream that both my neighbor and Brian can get to know each other so we can engage in one of those macho man friendships that men have. I admire their ability to make friends almost instantly. But I think that in that sense, I'm more the macho man in the relationship, because if Brian was a dog, he would be a chihuahua who barks at his own shadow. Of course, he would also be a chubby chihuahua. It may be cruel to say that, but I have to get even somehow at least. Well, I'll leave you guys with this. I'll write next month or so to give you a preview of how it all went. And hopefully by then, I'll have some new, different tidbits. I don't know, aliens in the neighborhood, time travelers in the sewers, or maybe Bigfoot living amongst Miss Sanchez's vegetable garden. Anyways, I'll update you. Update number 1. The situation with Brian's becoming too uncomfortable for me to cope with. I thought he had changed, but I see that he hasn't. He starts to berate me for something stupid, which was partly his fault, by the way. In the evening, we needed some salt, and I think the stores had already closed. It's because of a little craving we had in the evening, and instead of spending more money on street food, we've been trying to give up junk food, we decided to prepare something light. But we needed salt, and while he went to take a bath, he told me to get salt from the neighbors. Neighbors, plural. Then I went as normal as I could, thinking that this whole jealousy thing was over, so I went to their house and asked for a little bit of salt. They treated me very kindly, and I went back immediately, as I did not want to push my luck. When I returned home, Brian asked me why it took me so long. He didn't say it as a reproach, but in a concerned way. I told him that I only went to the neighbors, but they wanted to make conversation with me. He was astonished and then made an angry face. I asked him what's wrong. He told me why I had gone to the neighbors, and now I'm puzzled. I told him that he was the one who told me to go ask for salt. But he refused by saying that he meant Miss X's house. Mr. X is our other next-door neighbor, who was a professional wrestler, boxer, or something. The guy's super reclusive, and I think his wife passed away a while ago. We have very little contact with him, to the point that it was only recently that I learned his real name. He was the one Brian would refer to for salt. Now I ask, why did he mention neighbors with an S? Plural. And, by saying that, only one option was the one that could be correct. And it wasn't something I made up, but objectively he is to blame for it. And we have little or no interaction with that man. How was I supposed to know he was referring to him? Logic dictates that I go to the other neighbors, but that's something that he chose to not understand. He gets upset, but he gets pretty upset to the point where out of nowhere an argument erupted that showed the worst side of his insecurities. So, I told him that I could not go on like this, and that if everything was going to be uncomfortable or restrictive from now on, I was going to leave the home. Then something happened that changed everything. He implied, after a good bit of discussion, that he was about to hit the wall. And ladies, you know what that means, automatic red flag. I told myself that I was not going to let my physical integrity be at stake. So I said I would leave, but he was quick and showed another side of himself. He told me to calm down, and even though I insisted on leaving, at least he decided to be a little more docile. Understanding the blunder I had just committed, he told me not to leave, that maybe he was the one who needed to go away for a while. He also said that he needed to clear his mind and think things through because he understood that I was being a bit irrational. I told him that yes, one should not talk about these things with a hot head. So he went off for a few laps in the car, texting me at halftime. That's when things calmed down, but now I'm on alert in case something else might happen. I don't trust the person next to me anymore, but I'm not going to die for that either. Update number 2. The waters have calmed down a bit, I must admit. I have to accept the fact that things with Brian have been tense. Very, very tense, but they're not so bad anymore. He's been investing some of his time in walking on the streets, but alone, where he clears his mind and head. And as hard as it is for me to admit this, surprisingly good. I understand that man's nature can change and that the mind's powerful, but I don't think it could be this powerful. When we started to talk again, he told me that he was relieved to finally be able to be with me again, as our separation was becoming quite bitter for him. It was like living with a stranger in your own home. He told me that he didn't want to bring up the subject of our neighbors because it was making him uncomfortable, and that he now understood that nothing was going on between me and our neighbor. He said that love could do anything and so on, and now I don't know if he thinks that, but if he does, good for me, because that means we can finally have a normal life again. What's more, he said he would even go to the falling in love again stage because he felt that something had been broken between us. So far, all he's done is breakfast in bed, but we all know it'll take more than that for him to win me back. Update number 3. I've been the victim of physical violence. Dear readers, as I read my last few posts, I realized that I was deluded and that I let too much happen before it was too late. The only thing I'm thankful for was that it did not end up worse. I'm walking around at my big sister's, and I've gone through the most depressive state I've ever been in my life. But just as I'll have to do this for the record, I'll also tell you guys what exactly happened. Things from the way I left them on the last note were seemingly going well. I still felt that there was a long way to go, and that at times, Brian's attitude came across too strangely, as if he wasn't entirely happy. And, well, it was like that he wasn't happy until one day he just straight up exploded. We were talking about various topics when suddenly he told me he was considering joining the local gym. Me and my big mouth. I simply told him that he might consider the neighbor's gym, as they might be able to give him a discount. That was like having done a ritual to summon a demon. Well, he told me he couldn't take it anymore, and asked me why I always had to bring up the neighbors, even though we had not talked about them in like forever. He told me that if I wanted to go with him, I should leave. I told him he was losing a lot of points with me, and he said I was lucky to have been with him in the first place. I got tired, and I straight up told him to go to hell. I yelled at him that he was an a-hole, and well, lots of other insults, but I think it's right on the target what I remarked. Maybe you do have a point, and that is that I do like one aspect of your neighbor. The fact that he treats his wife well, something you lack. And I also yelled that the man was smoking hot. The next thing I remember was a stinging pain in my eye, and then a broader pain upon my head. And then boom, out like a light. When I woke up, I was in my bed with the worst headache I've ever had in my entire life. I felt like I'd slept for 1,000 years, and my body was very heavy and weak, and when I looked around, Brian was laying next to me, his back to me. He woke up when I got up and stared at me as I went to the bathroom to look at myself in the mirror. He pulled me by the arm, and all at once I laid down on the bed. I really didn't have the strength to stay upright. He said he was so sorry, but I felt such an immense rage that I just stood up as best as I could and went to the living room. Since I never changed my clothes and I wasn't in my PJs, unlike Brian, I was able to leave the house almost running, regardless of my look. I grabbed my purse and left on the first bus that I caught, which was conveniently going to my sister's place. Now, here I am, rethinking a lot of things in life. I cried to her, and my other sister said that she was going to take a half-day trip just to see me because she was furious as hell, but on the other hand, I was not well. I'm far from fine, but beyond the swollen eye and the throbbing headache, I think what hurts the most is my heart. It'll sound so corny and trite, but seriously, to think that a person I love the most, the one who swore before God to take care of you and to protect you forever, that person has done the worst damage to you in your entire life. How do you cope with that? What terrifies me the most is all the time before I can recover, I don't feel safe. The world's getting too big for me, and at any moment he could show up and continue or even finish the job. I don't want to see him. I don't want to see him in pictures. I don't want anything to do with him. I asked my sister to delete everything that has to do with him, except for our chat, since that may come down to be treating as evidence in the future, 'Cause yes, there's going to be lawsuits, divorce, and even death penalty if they let me. Because he abused me in every possible way for a long time. I'm tired of crying, I'm tired of feeling this way and being the victim. I know I need sleep, but I just want justice. I'm afraid that even with justice on my side, I won't get to feel satisfied. It's one of the scenarios that are most likely to occur to me, sadly. Update number 4. We had gone to couples therapy, we traveled together, and we were in discussions to start a family. But none of that mattered. Or all of that was a complete falsehood, because something even worse happened than the punch that Brian gave me. I feel like I could get banned from any platform if I ever write everything now that I think about him. It's a strong material. Turns out the son of a gun was cheating on me with our neighbor's wife. With a model who was very nice to me the whole time. Yeah, that's right, the very hypocrite was blaming me for something completely false, of course, so he could cover his back for what he was doing. I swear I've never in my existence encountered anybody as disgusting as him. I found out because of an oversight on his part. Since the day I left home, he's been writing me, sending me all kinds of messages from apologies and new tokens of affections to insults. But the worst thing happened precisely when I was having lunch on one occasion, and I got more messages from him. But I noticed by the notifications on the home screen that they were different because he had written to another name. There was about 5 messages barely, but they were a bit long, and my sister was the one who saved me, because when we realized what it was, she told me to take a picture of it. Only a minute went by and the messages were deleted. The idiot realized it too late and I managed to get them all. It's then that I started my revenge. I wrote them a whole Bible, telling him everything from all sorts of names to insults and anything I could think of at the time. It turns out that in the beginning, he really thought I had something going on with a neighbor. So he talked to his wife, and that's when it all started. It was disgusting because even knowing it was all false, he still criticized me and even hit me knowing the truth. How unmanly you have to be to hit an innocent woman. That, coupled with the insult he gave me after we parted ways, is all the evidence I needed to be able to take the guy to court. And I will, but my sister says to wait a bit. My other sister is way more impulsive and says to do it as soon as possible. Well, during my stay with my sisters, I started doing 2 things first. Going to therapy, and boy, was there some stuff to cut. I was reevaluating my entire life and how I let a lot of things go that end up converging in the dark matter and all this marks that I had on my face. The second thing is that I secretly talked to my neighbor. I got his contact information through the gym and I showed him the screenshots of the convos, telling him I was terrified and upset about the whole thing. At first he took it well, or I guess, I don't know, since we were talking via text message per se. Then he told me I didn't have anything to worry about. After a while, I was getting calls and messages from my other neighbors, telling me what's going on in my house as they saw my neighbor screaming and almost banging the door down. At one point, I thought the worst was going to happen. You know, like in one of those infidelity shows, and I was told that they saw Brian leaving the place the next day with a super small suitcase, and just at that moment when the neighbor wasn't watching. That's right, he was in front of our house so he could catch Brian. The neighbor told me later that if the guy was smart, it's the best that he just left town entirely, but I thought I would not be so sure about that. He also told me that I was now free to go back to the house, so I did, being escorted by my sisters, of course, who even stayed a whole night with me. We picked up all of Brian's things, and they're now piled up in the driveway. If he wants to come and get them, he just has to come and get them, and that's it. He won't have to do any digging. I'm also in talks about how to proceed legally. Although, with the scare that neighbor gave Brian, I guess that's enough. I do feel kinda bad for them, though. They look like a cute couple, even being referenced in my last discussion with Brian for the same thing. But I can see that only happens in fairy tales. If this were a movie, I would make an ally of the neighbor, and we would end up together. But I'll tell you something I got tired of repeating to Brian. He doesn't interest me for one reason or another. Besides, he's 10 years older than me, and I don't get along with such pronounced age differences. Now, I'm alone in the house with a lock, but I'm still afraid of what might happen. My sister came up with a rather strange idea, but one that I don't entirely dislike. And that's to invite my neighbor to the house, but after he told me he might be going somewhere else, I thought of my other neighbor, Mr. X. He and I have not interacted much, and still, when I got back, he told me that if I needed anything, he was at my disposal. He, as well as many other people, found out about the drama at my house, and he says it's supremely despicable everything Brian's done. And it is. Now, I don't want to be around anyone anymore. I just want to be alone and to be left alone for good. Well, even though therapy helped, I still understand that I need my time, and it won't be a short time. I want the peace I've always needed. Update number 5. I don't know how many movies, books, or series I've seen in my life, but none of them had a more satisfying ending than my story. After all the legal battles, I finally had a chance to keep the house, so I could stay under my roof fairly and legally. However, I did not feel safe since Brian had not yet returned the keys, so I had to ask for some help. This help was Mr. X, our other neighbor, who volunteered to assist me in case Brian showed up, and he did. He announced that he was going to come over one day without warning, so from then on, Mr. X became a tenant in my room, where we spent whole days talking, and he told me that I was right to get out of that relationship. The same thing everybody else was telling me, by the way, and that I should not worry about Brian as I would be safe with him. On a random day, I heard the door of the house being opened. Just when Mr. X wasn't there, I sent him a quick message warning him about it. It was Brian, indeed, and he was looking mad. He looked at me and said that he would get his stuff. Well, I didn't want to make any time or anything, and just when he saw that I'd already taken the things out of the room, he asked me if everything was definite. I said yes, and he asked if there was a way to fix everything, and I simply told him no. But he did not take that very well. He told me that I was making a mistake, and he was very apologetic and blah blah blah. Pure dog face that doesn't work on me. Because of him, I had a nice black eye for weeks, and that was a humiliation that I was not willing to tolerate any longer. I told him to hurry up, and he said he was going to take his sweet time if he wanted to, taking longer in the process on purpose. Then Mr. X arrived. He appeared at the door asking Brian if he could help him with the bags, and you would have seen the look on his face. Although Mr. X is much older, he outweighs Brian by about half a head and still has a great physique, so he faced him, and in 1 second Brian said, "I see you're actually messing around with this dude?" And that, ladies and gentlemen, was it. Mr. X punches him square in the face so hard that to this day I'm surprised Brian did not pass out. It was like an action movie, only a little uneven. Brian rammed him, and they both ran out of the house, tumbling down the main stairs. Sure, Brian is not fit, but he's still heavy, and he tried to give Mr. X a fight. However, he was like a kid taking on a dog. They may be the same size, but not the same power, and Mr. X had that dog in him. Mr. X at one point rejoined, and that's when people on the block started to approach, some of them calling the police, and I'd say my favorite part was when Mr. X punched Brian in the belly. And he even yelled, "Aren't you so strong? Or is it that you're only strong when you hit women?" With that, the 50-year-old man sealed Brian's fate. Everyone started clapping for him, and Brian walked away with his things almost limping. Some other neighbors were going to join the fight, but X himself said no. Let the loser walk away with his tail between his legs. It was a tremendous folly, let me tell you, and since then I have not heard from Brian again. And the little I've been told about him is that he went somewhere else to live with a cousin, that's all. I owe a lot to Mr. X, who can now go home relaxed, but telling me that he's never had so much fun in his life. He got to have a big old bruise on his shoulder, but he tells me that's the wonders that Brian received will take much longer to heal. That gave me a little chuckle and a little pity. However, all those feelings went away as I remember why all that happened. More like Brian was lucky the police did not get there in time to take him away in handcuffs because of the restraining order. Oh, and before you go to wondering, our neighbors also went through some bitter situations. Of course, there's behind the scenes because I don't want to get involved in that, but all I know is that my neighbor, the hot gym trainer, gosh, it feels so good to say that without thinking you're offending your crazy husband. Well, he moved out, leaving his wife. Yep, that's right. Yeah, they're going through a divorce, and although I feel that everything will go in her favor, as always, the scale goes towards us women without even mediating the issue of who was good or who was bad. It's a pity because we could have become good friends, united by a common hatred. Well, anyways, on the other hand, well, you can't really trust that woman. Let's just say that she's lost her popularity faster than I could have imagined. Being now pointed out in the streets of the town, the brands that worked with her in the modeling agency have canceled several contracts because of the bad public image that she gave the whole affair. I'm in the process of joining the gym, precisely. Also in the same place, I could take self-defense or boxing classes. If so, the next joker who wants to get in my face is going to think twice. I look at myself in the mirror, and I feel better, like a new woman who isn't afraid of anything or anyone. Well, this story was a wild one. I just want to first talk about how Mr. X, he might have been an old man, but he was down for a fight. It's true what they were saying about him in the comment section. Mr. X has that dog in him. I want to know what you guys were thinking about the story, the abusive husband, everything that OP had to go through, and this was all just a manipulation tactic by this jerk so he could cheat on OP behind her back and make her the guilty one. It was ridiculous, and I think that guy is so toxic, and I'm glad OP got away. Let me know your thoughts and what you would have done if you were in this situation. Maybe somebody out there has been in this type of relationship. Let me know what you did to separate yourself. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you want more daily videos, consider subscribing to the channel, and also check out my favorite playlist. Down below, you can find some of my favorite stories. You can find my other YouTube channels. Guys, have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. And of course, remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.